1 for XEI 506 is graphing inequalities on a number line. So you're going to be asked to both tell me what the inequality is when you're given a number line, like all these problems here, and you're going to be asked to graph an inequality that you're given on a number line. So I'm going to go through the first type, and then the second type should follow pretty easily from understanding how to read a graph. So before we start, let's look over at this box on this side. This is hopefully a review of what inequalities mean. If you have an inequality, the bigger side, the wider side, is facing the bigger number. I kind of imagine it kind of like an alligator. So the alligator mouth wants to eat the bigger number, and it's going to ignore the smaller number, kind of like an alligator wants more food versus less food. And I know it's kind of silly, but that's how I remember it too. So if we look up here, this is saying that x is the bigger number, so x is greater than 1. Okay, and when it's facing away, it's saying, okay, well now x is the smaller number, so x is smaller than 1. When you add an equal sign underneath, that means that, or not an equal sign, but a line underneath, it creates kind of like a half equal sign here, but with an inequality. That means that x is greater than or equal to 1, or x is less than or equal to 1, or whatever number. I'm just using 1 as an example. So let's look over here at our first graph. Whenever you see an open circle on a graph, that means it's either going to be greater than or less than. When you see a closed filled-in circle, or when you graph a closed filled-in circle, that's going to be when you've got greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. Okay, so in this case we have an open circle, so that's going to be this first case, and you'll notice that part of the graph is shaded. And the part that's shaded is all the numbers that are smaller or less than -3. So this is saying that x can be any of these numbers. So x is less than -3. Okay, and let's double check. We've got this little alligator mouth pointing at the bigger number, which is -3, which means that x is smaller. And if we look back at the graph, x is smaller than -3. Okay, in our second example, we've got a closed circle, and all the numbers bigger than -1 are shaded. So we've got x. Okay, we know that x is going to be bigger than -1, and since this circle is filled in, it's bigger than or greater than or equal to. Okay, then we can have cases where it's a segment of the number line instead of, from -1 on up. It's from -6 to 5. So in these cases, you're going to have x in the middle. We know that x is bigger than -6, and since it's an open circle, there's no or equal to, just bigger than, greater than. And then x is going to be less than or equal to 5. Okay, so x is bigger than -6 and less than or equal to -5, and that can be wrote in either way. So we could also write this: x is bigger than -6 and x is smaller than or equal to 5. Or you can write it as what's called a compound inequality. That's what this is called right here. This is called a compound inequality. And then we've got this case down here where there's a gap in the middle, and x can be one of these two things. Now think about x is going to be a number, so x can't sufficiently be less than or equal to -5 and be bigger than 2. There's no number that you can pick that is going to be both of those things. So when you write these, you're going to say, okay, x is less than or equal to -5, or, because it can't be both, x is greater than 2. Okay? So that's also called a compound inequality. So if we look, our most basic types are the first two, and you just have to be careful of the open and closed circles. Open means there's no or equals to, there's no line underneath the equals or the inequality sign. And then if it's closed, there's going to be a line under. And then you just have to be really careful about the direction of the sign. Otherwise, that's it for level 1. You might be asked to, for example, graph x is less than or equal to 3. And then you would just create a number line, okay, with arrows. And this isn't rocket science, you just graph 3. You can graph 0 on there too if you want. Okay, but you don't have to graph a ton. And then you just go ahead and shade in everything bigger than 3, because it's, or sorry, smaller than 3, because x is less than or equal to 3. So shade that in. And then you just need a filled in circle at 3. So you must know how to go backwards also for level 1. And that's the basics here.